Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is February 10, 2022, and in our last video, we discussed some Seattle workers going on strike in the construction industry, specifically the building materials, even more specifically the concrete trade. And continuing with the topic of buildings, let's talk about housing. The US has a massive housing crisis. Whether we're talking about owning a house or renting an apartment, prices are completely out of control. People are unable to afford their rent or unable to afford to purchase a house. Therefore, people are unable to move, unable to meet their life goals, and basically life is kind of grinding to a halt. That's where people can even stay housed. Meanwhile, tent cities pop up in various cities. It's a gigantic disaster, and really neither the Democrats nor the Republicans are doing anything about it. We know that 2008, that massive economic crash, the first major crisis of capitalism in a long time, was fueled in part by a housing bubble in the 2000s, basically. I mean, one of the factors was that mortgages were being given to people who the banks knew could not afford really to pay it. So then the banks would get some money from that, and then they would foreclose and they'd get the property back. That was part of it. I mean, other parts where they were gambling on other people gambling was some of what was going on. There's a movie called The Big Short that is a pretty entertaining dramatization of what was going on. But what was the solution? Well, they did this sort of, banking reform. One of the things in relation to housing is they just made it harder for people to buy houses. They didn't say, oh, well, people need housing, so we need to prioritize that, but we also need to restrict, banks' predatory practices. No. They basically just made it harder for people to get a mortgage. So combine that with commercial investors just buying up swaths of residential property. Internet corporations like Zillow do this, and it's just gone from bad to worse. But recently, 2016, I think, was the last year that housing prices were kind of coming down. Since 2016 into 2017, prices have just been shooting through the roof. They're completely unaffordable. And I mean, now it's like you look at the, median house price in a lot of areas, it's like $350,000 to $450,000. Can you find cheaper? Yeah, if you want to live in the middle of absolutely nowhere. If, on the other hand, you don't want to be torn away and uprooted from the places that you know and the people that you love there, then you might be in a tough spot. I myself personally have been wanting to move for about 4 years, and it's just not possible. If you try to get into an apartment, hope you're okay with a sardine tin, because that's pretty much what's available at anything that has previously been considered a sane rent. And then trying to buy a house, I mean, there's a lot of factors. There's credit score, but maybe even your credit score is good. There's the down payment, although if you're a first-time house buyer, there might be a program in your state where they let you get away with less of a down payment or a small down payment, but maybe not. So maybe if you can't afford a 20% down payment, then you get stuck paying for private mortgage insurance, which isn't insurance for you. It's insurance for the lender who is giving you your mortgage. So you just get to pay that too. Here, hey, pay another $200 a month for absolutely no fucking reason other than you couldn't afford a 20% down payment. Then there's the question of, can you get approved for the mortgage in terms of your income levels? Meaning, you've either got to work from home and have a portable income, or you've got to have a job offer lined up, which is enough that 1/3 of it qualifies you for a decent mortgage, because that's what they require. That's part of the reforms coming out of the 2000s and 2008, is you can only use 1/3 of your income towards mortgage. And, doesn't matter if you've actually been able to afford and could be paying a lot more than that currently in your rent as a percentage of your income. No, that doesn't matter. So let's say that, all those things, you have decent credit and you have, I don't know, whatever, as a down payment that meets the minimum, and you even get some kind of a job offer in the area, and okay, you're qualified, you get a mortgage. Is the amount that you're qualified for actually going to get you anything in the market when, like I said, maybe the median house price is like $300,000, $400,000. Gone are the days where you could buy a house for $60,000 or $90,000. I mean, it's just forget it. Times have changed in a way that, I mean, it's like musical chairs, and we're down to the last few chairs, and everybody who lost is in a tent city. It's just horrendous. And now I don't want to overstate it and hurt the case here. Not everyone is literally in a tent city, although way too many people are. You want to see more about that? Check out a YouTube channel called Invisible People, which just interviews homeless people and asks them what their story is. And many homeless people in the US today are college educated, some have graduate degrees, and many work. I have worked alongside people who were sleeping in a tent next to the highway just because they lost their apartment. Like, this is the reality of the situation. And it's just really nowhere in the national discussion. Prices are just going up and up and up. And again, salaries, not so much. I have a USA Today article that I want to read. However, before we even get to that, here's a quick tweet. This is from Peter Stefanovich. If you only read one thing today, make it this. And then there's a clipping from a UK newspaper. Mission impossible. In 1965, I was a fireman, earning £1,000 a year, and I bought a house for £3,500 with a mortgage of 3 times my salary. Today, that very ordinary property is valued at £650,000. So a buyer would need a £50,000 deposit and an income of £200,000 a year. This shows how utterly impossible the situation is for young people. John Searle Grantham. So yeah, just the ratio of house prices to what people are actually earning, it's just, there are not options for working people. And you can see how desperate and tight the entire situation is. If you actually even get out into the market, houses are on the market for like a week tops, and they're being bought in cash for more than the list price. That's how desperate people are to just get a place. It is like I said, a desperate, horrible situation. So let's get into this USA Today article. The title is, "It's Tough to Buy a Starter Home These Days. 3 Americans Tell Their Stories." And again, when an economic system cannot deal with the basic, utterly basic need of housing, when an economic system cannot provide housing to people, it is time to throw away that system. So this article was written by Swapna Venugopal Ramaswamy. It's dated yesterday, February 9, 2022. It starts with a note. This story is the first in a regular series that examines the challenges Americans face, I'd say US Americans face, as they try to buy starter homes. Again, gigantic challenge. So let's read the article. I thought that this was pretty good on first pass. So, Christine Rodriguez decided to extend the lease on her rental trailer home in Des Moines, Iowa last month, after spending more than a year trying to buy a starter home. Under the renewed lease, however, she'll pay 13% more in rent over the next year, with her payment going from $1,200 to $1,350. And with prices also rising for essentials like food, electricity, and gas, her monthly expenses will go up from $1,600 to $2,000. Rodriguez, a waitress in a sports bar, and her husband, Oscar, a construction worker, had been meticulously saving for 5 years to afford a down payment on a home in the $150,000 to $220,000 range. But when they started looking early last year, they found that the pandemic had upended the housing market, shrinking the pool of available homes and sending prices to historic highs. Intense competition and multiple bids have forced her to increase her budget for a new home. After starting in the $180,000 to $215,000 range, she is now considering prices of between $210,000 and $230,000. Quote, "We have no choice," says the 36-year-old mother of 6. "There are no homes out there, and our expenses are through the roof," unquote. Rodriguez is not the only one in this predicament. Many Americans, U.S. Americans, are looking for houses, but those shopping for entry-level or starter homes, those smaller than 1,400 square feet, are especially challenged. Over the past 12 months, rents spiked by an unprecedented 18% nationally, according to Apartment List's National Rent Report, released in January. And housing costs saw a similar surge, with the median sales price of an existing single-family home rising to $364,300 in December 2021, up 16% from the same month a year earlier, according to the National Association of Realtors. Comment: in 1 year, 16% increase. When you're talking about prices as high as they are already, that's a massive amount of money. Continuing, why is the housing market so high right now? For potential buyers of starter homes, the situation has gotten worse in the last year. Apart from contending with fewer and more expensive homes on the market, rampant inflation and rising mortgage rates further threaten to diminish their purchasing power. Inflation rose by 7% over the past year, its fastest pace in nearly 40 years, and mortgage rates continued to tick up, putting affordability further out of reach for many. Indeed, homes priced between $100,000 to $250,000 saw the volume of sales decrease by 23% in December 2021 compared with December of 2020. 1 year, again, these giant fluctuations. Whereas homes sold in the over $1 million bracket went up by 38% in the same time period, according to data obtained from the National Association of Realtors by USA Today. The data once again throws into sharp relief the divergent experiences of the haves and the have-nots that have defined much of the pandemic housing market. Comment: kind of like we're in a gigantic economic crisis. Quote, there's plenty of buyer interest, but no supply, says Lawrence Yun, the chief economist for NAR. The wealthy have enjoyed record highs in the stock market and have accumulated housing wealth and can afford high-priced homes, unquote. One of the main drivers of the housing shortage is the decline in entry-level home construction, according to Sam Cotter, chief economist for Freddie Mac. The number of starter homes under construction has declined significantly from 40% of homes built in 1980 to 7% in 2019. Pause. So, one of the things driving homelessness as we know it today, which is not a timeless phenomenon. You know, throughout time there have been sort of wandering ascetics and traveling minstrels and things, but like homelessness, people sleeping on park benches and things, not common throughout history actually. It is largely a product of the neoliberal era from the 70s and on. There are a number of factors for this. Deinstitutionalization of state-run mental facilities, for example, is one of them, but also the destruction of single-room occupancy flop houses. So this is kind of what you saw in the like rental and condo market in the 70s and 80s, was this gentrification where they would tear down cheap housing that people could actually afford and replace it with expensive, more luxury apartments because, you know, the builders were like, hey, I'm going to build something. I want it to be maximum return on investment. And there's really little to no consideration of social needs. That's, you know, maybe you'll get some citywide regulations or something like that. But so the net result, and of course, you know, that example is speaking of larger multi-unit buildings, is that there were fewer places that were cheap and affordable. And so, you know, that's multi-unit things. Looking at individual houses, the same thing has happened over the last 40 years. At the beginning of neoliberalism, 1980, 40% of homes are starter homes that, you know, average working people who worked as a waitress or, you know, something like that, could actually afford. And now it's less than 10%. They're just not building this stuff. And a lot of the old stock is still occupied. You know, the population has grown in this time. So anyway, continuing. Tiffany Ayler, a real estate agent who has been working with Rodriguez, says in 2021, the Des Moines housing market saw its lowest inventory of houses for sale in 20 years. Quote, since June of 2020, we have been in an inverted market where we have more houses pending than for sale, she says. And in 2021, home values increased by close to 20% instead of our usual 4 to 6%. Ayler says that either homes have been too expensive for Rodriguez or the house sells too fast. Quote, it was gone before we could schedule a showing, like sometimes just later that day, she says. Quote, and if we went to see one that she liked, it was gone by the time her husband could see it, unquote. The missed opportunity to buy a home can have long-term financial consequences and can contribute to major disparities in wealth, according to an analysis by the Urban Institute. Younger homebuyers build wealth earlier. For instance, those who bought their first home between the ages of 25 and 34 have the greatest housing wealth, accumulating close to $150,000 in median home equity by age 60, according to the report. And just commenting, equity is like how much you've invested in it, so potentially how much you could get back in a sale. People who bought between the ages of 35 and 44 had $72,000 less in home equity by 60. That's half. And those who wait until they were 45 or older lost more than $100,000 in median wealth. You can see a graphic there, median home equity at age 60 or 61, and the median value of first home. Clear trend across the board. Quote, homeownership has always been the best way to build wealth, and if you can't grab onto that ladder, you don't have that opportunity, says Laurie Goodman, director of the Housing Finance Policy Center at the Urban Institute. Quote, my advice would be to, if you can stretch to buy a home now, you should do so because of the long-term opportunities to build wealth, unquote. Due to the supply and demand imbalance, the likelihood that home prices go down is very low, says Goodman, and that makes trying to buy something crucial, especially with the rental market rising. Quote, when you enter the housing market, you lock the bulk of your housing expenses with a mortgage, says Goodman. In a world with rising inflation, that's very, very valuable. You are also looking at a couple of years of hefty rent increases, which is only going to make it harder to save for that home, unquote. Comment, assuming you can even keep a roof over your head at all. Apartment rents surge in Austin. Jonathan Weldon is living that reality. Last July, Weldon, a youth pastor, moved with his family from Shreveport, Louisiana, to Georgetown, Texas, some 25 miles north of Austin, when he started a new job at a church there. In Shreveport, he had been able to sell his 2,300 square foot house in less than a week for $2,000 more than asking. Over the past 6 months in Austin, where home prices have gone up by 30% in 2021. Pause. So let's say that your house was worth $300,000. Boom. In 1 year, it's now worth $400,000. He's lost several bids to people offering more than $30,000 above asking on homes priced around $250,000. Meanwhile, rents are up by 40% in Austin, according to Redfin. After staying at a church friend's home for a few months, Weldon is now paying $1,475 to rent a duplex townhouse, more than what he was paying in mortgage on a larger house in Shreveport. So that's what happens a lot too. People paying more than a mortgage would cost in rent just because they can't get their hands on a mortgage and/or house. A year ago, the rents in Austin for a similar place would have been closer to $1,000 or $1,100. So that's like a 50% increase almost, 40 to 50% increase. Quote, it's tough because the last thing I want to do is pour money into something that I'm not getting any return on. I really did not want to rent at all, he says. If you're going to stay somewhere longer than 2 or 3 years, you need to be building equity, and we're not doing that right now, unquote. Chris LaForge, a Redfin agent who has been working with Weldon, calls it a perfect storm. Quote, we have a whole bunch of new people moving here from all around the country, and we've got about 29 days of inventory. A balanced market would be about 6 months of inventory, so they have about a sixth of what they need. Quote, in addition, we're also having competition, not just from other first-time buyers, but also investors, trying to buy up all the properties that they can, especially in the lower price range, unquote. So commenting, this is what's happening, whether it's institutional, more, commercial, or it's individual real estate investors like trying to, pick up half a dozen rental properties, this is what's happening. I mean, the phrase there ought to be a law has never been more applicable. It's housing. It is the most basic thing you need. Without it, just washing your hands after using the bathroom is a problem. Preparing food is a problem. Everything is a problem when you don't have housing. While starter homes tend to be in the $250,000 range and remain the most competitive, the sales of the most affordable homes, median sale price of $127,500, rose 11% year over year in the fourth quarter of 2021, according to Redfin. This is likely due to a few trends, including investors buying up properties that are fixer-uppers. And commenting, believe me, if it's $125,000, it most likely really is a fixer-upper. Workers earning more as the economy strengthens. That's charming. Wow. Little bit of humor added in here. And the end of mortgage forbearance, that would be people got a break on their mortgages because of the pandemic. That's now over, causing some homeowners to list their homes, says Daryl Fairweather, the chief economist for Redfin. So time out. What does the end of mortgage forbearance causing some homeowners to list their homes mean? It means they're getting kicked out of their house and they have to sell their house to pay whatever they owe and then hope that the amount that they walk away with is enough to house themselves somewhere else. So they are back in the market. That complicates things a lot more. So it's not like, oh, a new house is here. No, it's somebody gets a house and then somebody has to go looking for one. So there's really no gain. Anyway, continuing. Quote, we're seeing an increase in listings of the most affordable homes now because those are owned by people who are likely lower income, more likely to have been laid off during the pandemic, and more likely to have missed payments, she says. This is the Daryl of Redfin. Since the market is so strong, meaning prices are so high, people who are behind on their mortgages might think it's a good time to cash in and list their homes, unquote. Home prices rise out of her range. When Alexa Erb, 27, found a new job at Boston University last month, working on diversity and inclusion initiatives, she enrolled in a course for first-time homebuyers. Her current role at Bentley University in Waltham, Massachusetts, comes with free on-campus housing, and Erb says she's hoping to buy a condominium when she takes up her new job next month, rather than paying rent. Quote, I've had the privilege of free on-campus housing for the past couple of years and saved up for a down payment. I want to build some of that social and cultural capital that comes with purchasing a home, adds Erb, who is looking for something in the $300,000 range, but acknowledges there's very little in my price range, unquote. So again, that's the Boston area, very little in the $300,000 and under range. That hasn't stopped Erb from putting in 3 offers in the last 3 weeks. Quote, the first one, I put in an offer a couple of $1,000s over asking, she says, and was very clearly beat out by one of the other 30 people who were at the open house and had the means to offer something even higher than I could, unquote. But Erb says she's determined and plans to sign a short-term rental lease, perhaps an Airbnb. Oh my God, Airbnb has helped to destroy the rental market. I mean, and the housing market too, because those investors, what are they doing? They're turning shit into Airbnb, which is like the definition of precarious housing. It's not even a rental, it's so fucking precarious. It's like basically like a hotel. So you just don't have the same rights that you would if you're a regular renter in many cases. Until she finds a place of her own. Quote, I think that it is a really important way to set myself up, she says. Buying my first home feels appealing, knowing that my money is going towards something, unquote. That's the end of the article. I feel for Alexa Erb. I mean, there's a lot of people in a similar situation. I think she's more optimistic now than she's going to be feeling 6 months from now. That's just my prediction. So anyway, I've made most of my comments already. The housing, it's just a crisis. It's a housing crisis. The USA is going down in flames in the housing department. Like, seriously, it's a towering inferno. Very few people are talking about it. The kind of market correction that would be required to get the prices down in the area where they should be, like I said, where they kind of were 5 years ago at least, would be huge. I mean, it would require a tanking of the economy, which would throw a lot of people out of work. I think that this is desperate and might be one of the things that will be driving the next crash, whenever it is in the next few years. I don't know. This is a seriously dire situation. People often ask, hey, S4A, can you recommend an org that I should join? Because people should join organizations. You know, don't just read and listen to socialist, Marxist, Leninist stuff. Join an organization and get into the fight in an organized way. You know, I often say try to join larger groups with real ties to the community that meet regularly, are active and healthy people, reasonably get along with each other, stuff like that. Getting involved with a toxic organization is potentially one of the most destructive things you can do. So try to avoid that. And if you want to get into a smaller organization as well that just really matches your personal politics and try to build it, hey, that's great too. But the bottom line is we got problems that need solving, so join the orgs that can solve these problems. I don't know what they are. You find out. You tell me. Let me know. Show us. Show us all. Okay? We got problems galore, and they need solving, and clearly the ruling class is not interested in solving them. That's going to take mass people's struggles. Okay? So join the org that can solve the housing crisis in your area, that can do something, that can at least hold major demonstrations, getting it in the news regularly, something. Join that org. Join whatever org can pull that off, And if it doesn't exist, help make it, either from scratch, or turn an org into that. But the org you should join is the org that can actually fix the problems that the country, that the working class is facing. We got to get out there, try things, see what works, but we've absolutely got to do it, because I'm telling you, things are dire, at least in this department. I know a lot of stories in this type of realm. I mean, they talked to several people here in this article. These are ultra common stories. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. What do you think? Leave a question or comment below. I always appreciate sincere and hopefully politely worded questions. We keep the discussion going in the comment section. I do moderate comments to prevent, dogpiling and just other kind of nonsense, but any kind of good faith, reasonable question, go for it. All that discussion helps everybody to be more knowledgeable, and it's just a help to everybody. Also, I get new video ideas out of it, so it helps the channel to keep evolving. All right, that's it from me. Thank you for listening, and thanks to the current patrons whose names are on the screen. Their support is crucial to this channel putting out as much content as it does. I would really like to keep this channel growing, and the financial support is not only encouraging, it's also money, and it's vital, because I have bills to pay, and I do spend a lot of time doing the research, finding the articles, thinking up good framing for the stories, recording them, editing them, exporting them, uploading them, promoting them. You get the picture. It's a lot of work and a lot of time. So thank you very much to everybody whose name is on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialismforall. I really appreciate it. You can sign up for as little as $2 a month or more. Like I said, everything's encouraging. It's also materially helpful. So thank you again to all the patrons, past and present. Also, to help the channel out in other ways, liking, sharing, subscribing, and leaving a comment, even if it's just good video or thanks. All of that helps to boost the channel and to expand the audience. The audience here has been growing at Socialism for All. I thank all of you for that, because your participation is one of the things that makes it grow. All right, I'm going to head out. Thanks again, and we'll catch you in the next video.